The soft hum of the car engine filled the silence as Eleanor gazed out the window, her wrinkled hands resting gently on her lap while sunlight spilled through the glass, painting golden streaks across her skin. She had been looking forward to this family trip for months. A week at the luxurious Seabreeze resort with her son Adrian, his wife Nicole, and their 2 children. At 71, moments like these felt rare and fleeting, like fragile treasures slipping through her fingers. Adrian had suggested the trip himself, and Eleanor's heart had leapt with quiet hope that perhaps, just perhaps, this was finally her chance to reconnect with him. 4 years, she had longed to bridge the quiet distance that had grown between them since Nicole entered his life. She had imagined long talks over dinner, laughter on the beach, and moments where her grandchildren might curl into her arms the way Adrian once had. But as the trip began, she realized things might not unfold the way she had hoped. The 4-hour drive was filled with laughter and conversation, none of which included her. Adrian and Nicole spoke animatedly about spa appointments, fine dining, and the exclusive yacht tours they had booked, their voices rising and falling like waves she could never reach. Eleanor sat quietly in the back seat, clutching her small purse, smiling whenever their eyes accidentally met, though they rarely did. Every now and then she tried to join in, asking about the children's school or offering to plan a family outing, but Nicole would respond with polite one-word answers, and Adrian would simply nod before changing the subject. The silence between mother and son felt heavier than the luggage in the trunk. Still, Eleanor told herself not to mind. She had learned long ago that peace was sometimes found in patience. As the landscape changed from city streets to the glimmering coastline, Eleanor's thoughts drifted back to the past, to another time when her life had been far from luxury. After her husband passed away, when Adrian was just 12, she had been left with nothing but a small house, a few savings, and it was stronger than grief. She had worked 3 jobs, cleaning rooms, waiting tables, and managing a tiny seaside inn, until one day, she saved enough to buy that very inn. That was the beginning of everything. With endless nights of hard work and sacrifice, she grew that inn into a chain of hotels known for their warmth and charm. But she had kept that secret locked away. Adrian had grown up thinking his mother simply worked for a hotel company, not that she was the company. Eleanor never wanted him to feel burdened by her success, or to love her for her wealth. She wanted him to love her as mom, the woman who had kissed his scraped knees and stayed up late sewing his school costumes. And yet, sitting in the back seat of his luxury car now, listening to his wife complain about which resort restaurant had the best wine list, Eleanor couldn't help but feel invisible. The more Nicole spoke, the smaller Eleanor seemed to become in their world. When they finally turned into the long, palm-lined driveway of Seabreeze Resort, Eleanor's chest tightened, not from sadness this time, but pride. The resort gleamed in the sunlight like a pearl nestled by the sea. She remembered the years it took to build it, the nights she slept in a construction trailer overseeing every inch of its progress. The gardens, bursting with orchids and bougainvillea, had been designed from her sketches. The marble lobby had been imported from Italy, polished until it shone like still water. It had taken 5 years to perfect, and now here she was, arriving as a guest in her own creation. Adrian parked the car near the valet stand, stepping out with his usual confident stride. Nicole adjusted her oversized sunglasses, the kind that screamed money, and stretched her legs as though she had just survived a great ordeal. "Finally," she muttered. "I thought that drive would never end." Eleanor smiled faintly and opened her own door slowly, taking in the familiar scent of salt and hibiscus in the air. She wanted to tell them how proud she was of this place, to say, "I built this for families like ours." But instead, she stayed silent, as she always had. Valets rushed forward, opening doors and unloading bags. One of them, a young man named Carlos, froze for a brief second when he saw her. "Mrs. Carter," he whispered before catching himself. Eleanor gave a subtle shake of her head and smiled kindly. "Just Eleanor today," she said softly. He nodded, understanding immediately. She didn't want her family to know who she really was, not yet. Nicole barely noticed the exchange. "Remember," she said briskly to Adrian as they walked toward the entrance, "I want the penthouse suite. If they say it's booked, make them unbook it." Adrian nodded obediently. Eleanor felt a pang in her chest. The confident boy she had raised, the one who once dreamed of becoming a musician, had turned into a man who took orders from his wife like an employee afraid of losing his job. Inside, the lobby shimmered with elegance, chandeliers glittering above, polished floors reflecting the ocean light, and guests chatting softly while sipping complimentary champagne. Eleanor's heart swelled with pride again. She could almost see herself years ago, walking these same floors in a hard hat and work boots, making sure every detail was perfect. But that pride dimmed when she caught her reflection in one of the mirrors. An old woman with tired eyes, small and unassuming, blending into the background of her own success. She wondered if Adrian or Nicole even noticed her anymore. Nicole was already striding toward the front desk, her heels clicking sharply against the marble. "Come on," she said over her shoulder. "Let's make sure they got our reservation right this time." Eleanor followed a few steps behind, her heart hopeful and heavy all at once. She didn't know it yet, but before the day was over, everything she kept hidden, the strength, the pride, the truth, would be forced into the light. The moment they stepped into the lobby, Eleanor's world seemed to fold in on itself. The air inside was cool and perfumed with jasmine, the faint sound of a piano drifting from somewhere near the bar. Every sound, every scent, every carefully chosen shade of cream and gold in the decor carried her signature, yet she stood there like a stranger in her own masterpiece. Behind the marble counter, Mia, the front desk manager, lifted her head and froze for a fraction of a second when her eyes met Eleanor's. It was the kind of recognition that flickered like lightning before disappearing just as fast. Eleanor gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of her head, silently pleading with the woman not to reveal her identity. Mia's posture straightened instantly, her professional smile returning as she greeted the arriving family. "Good afternoon. Welcome to Seabreeze Resort," she said smoothly, her voice calm and pleasant. "Do you have a reservation?" Adrian stepped forward, exuding casual confidence, as though the world bent itself to his convenience. "Yes, under Carter," he said. "We'll be needing the penthouse suite. I called last week to confirm." Mia began typing quickly, her fingers dancing across the keyboard. "I see the reservation here, Mr. Carter, but the penthouse suite is currently occupied. You've been assigned one of our ocean view deluxe rooms instead, very spacious, with a private balcony and—" "That won't do," Nicole interrupted sharply, her voice slicing through the air. "We were promised the penthouse." Guests nearby turned their heads. Eleanor's stomach twisted. She had spent her life ensuring Seabreeze staff treated every guest with dignity, but now she stood watching her own daughter-in-law speak to them like servants. "I'm terribly sorry, ma'am," Mia replied, keeping her tone respectful. "But the penthouse is unavailable at the moment." Nicole leaned across the counter, her diamond bracelet glinting under the chandelier light. "Listen," she said coldly, "I don't care who's in it. You can move them somewhere else. I paid for the best, and I expect the best." Adrian stayed quiet, glancing at his wife with a faint, apologetic smile that never reached his eyes. Eleanor stepped forward quietly, trying to ease the tension. "Nicole, dear," she began softly, "maybe we can take the ocean view for tonight and—" "Please don't speak," Nicole hissed without even turning to look at her. The words were like a slap, sharp, public, and humiliating. "Mia, don't listen to her. She's just the help we brought along to watch the kids. She doesn't understand how these things work." The world seemed to stop spinning. For a moment, Eleanor couldn't breathe. A hot wave of shame climbed up her neck as nearby guests began whispering. She could feel their stares, the pity in their eyes. "Nicole!" Adrian muttered, trying to laugh it off. "Come on, don't say that in front of everyone." But the damage was already done. "What?" Nicole shot back. "It's true. Maybe if she hadn't insisted on tagging along, we wouldn't be dealing with all this mess." Her voice was loud enough for the entire lobby to hear. Adrian turned to his mother with an awkward chuckle. "Mom, maybe just go sit down for a bit, okay? We'll handle this." Eleanor's fingers tightened around the handle of her small suitcase. For a moment, she thought her knees might give out. This was her son, the boy she had carried in her arms when he was sick, the boy who used to call her his hero, and now here he was, standing beside a woman who had just reduced her to nothing in front of strangers. She could have spoken then. She could have ended the charade with a single sentence. "I own this place." But she didn't. She swallowed the hurt, straightened her back, and looked toward Mia, who stood frozen behind the counter, her eyes full of unspoken apology. Eleanor gave her a small, reassuring nod. She wouldn't let her staff suffer because of this. "It's all right," she said quietly. "I'll just find somewhere to sit." She turned and began walking toward the lounge area, the sound of her low-heeled shoes echoing softly across the marble floor. Each step felt heavier than the last, her heart sinking deeper into her chest. Behind her, Nicole continued arguing, her voice carrying through the lobby like nails against glass. "I'll have your manager down here this instant," she snapped. "This is unacceptable." Eleanor settled into a chair near the window overlooking the ocean. The blue horizon stretched endlessly before her, calm and cruel in its indifference. She sat perfectly still, hands clasped in her lap, staring at the waves until the sting in her eyes faded. After a few minutes, Mia approached discreetly, placing a small glass of lemon water on the table beside her. "Mrs. Carter," she whispered, careful that no one else could hear. "Are you all right?" Eleanor smiled faintly, her voice steady but tired. "I'm fine, Mia. Thank you. Please, continue your work as usual. Don't let that woman trouble you." Mia hesitated. "If you'd like, I can call Mr. Daniels. He's on site today." "He'd..." Eleanor gently waved her hand. "No. Not yet. Let them enjoy their stay. There's no need for anyone to know who I am." Her voice softened with something like sorrow. "Not even my son." Mia looked at her for a long moment before nodding and returning to the counter. A few minutes later, Adrian and Nicole finally approached, their expressions smug with victory. "See," Nicole said, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "They upgraded us after all. I told you they'd fix it." She didn't mention that Mia had arranged the upgrade after quietly consulting Eleanor's private file, a decision Eleanor allowed out of pity rather than pride. "Come on," Nicole continued. "Let's go up. I need a shower after all that nonsense." Adrian turned to his mother, his tone casual. "Mom, you'll be staying in the adjoining suite, okay? It's smaller, but it's fine for you." Eleanor nodded, her voice calm. "Of course, dear. Whatever suits you best." Nicole gave her a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Try not to get in the way, all right? We're here to relax." Then, without another glance, she linked her arm through Adrian's and strutted toward the elevator. Eleanor rose slowly from her seat, taking one last look around the lobby, the staff pretending not to stare, the guests whispering behind hands, and Mia watching her with quiet respect. The pain inside her chest settled into something else now, something sharp and still. Humiliation had burned away her hesitation, leaving behind the quiet steel of a woman who had nothing left to prove. As she followed them into the elevator, she pressed the button for the top floor. The polished brass reflected her face, old, lined, tired, but behind those weary eyes, something new glimmered. They thought she was invisible. They thought she was small. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. And Eleanor, for the first time in years, was ready to remind them. When the elevator doors slid open to the top floor, the sweet scent of sea salt and orchids filled the air. The penthouse corridor stretched before them like a quiet promise of luxury, soft carpets, golden wall sconces, and tall glass doors revealing breathtaking views of the ocean beyond. Adrian walked ahead with his usual easy stride, his arms still looped around Nicole's waist, while Eleanor followed behind them at a slow, careful pace. The suite was massive. Sunlight poured in from every window, illuminating the soft white furniture and glimmering accents of coral and gold. Nicole dropped her designer bag onto the couch and exhaled dramatically, spinning once in the center of the room as if she had conquered something grand. "Finally," she said with a satisfied sigh. "It's not the penthouse, but at least it's decent." Adrian chuckled and walked toward the minibar. "You always get what you want, don't you?" "Of course I do," she said lightly, her eyes landing on Eleanor, who was setting her small suitcase by the adjoining door. "Oh, you can take that room," Nicole said dismissively, gesturing toward the smaller suite beside the main one. "There's a couch if you need extra space for your things." Eleanor smiled faintly. "That will be fine, dear." She had long learned to hide her emotions behind calm composure, the same way she used to mask her exhaustion during her years of building her empire. As Nicole disappeared into the bathroom to freshen up, Adrian poured himself a drink and walked to the balcony. The sound of crashing waves rose to meet him as he stared out over the shimmering blue horizon. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Eleanor said quietly, stepping beside him. "You used to love the ocean when you were little." Adrian nodded but didn't look at her. "Yeah, I guess," he said. "Nicole likes it. She says it's relaxing." There was no warmth in his tone, only a kind of practiced indifference. Eleanor studied his profile, the hard line of his jaw, the faint shadows beneath his eyes. He looked successful, confident, everything she had once hoped for him to become. But something was missing. The kindness that once lived behind his smile had dulled, replaced by something shallow and weary. "You work too much," she said softly. "You should take time to rest too." "Mom," he interrupted, setting his glass down. "Please don't start. I'm fine. Everything's fine." The words were sharp enough to make her step back slightly. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course." Later that evening, after everyone had settled in, the family gathered for dinner at the resort's main restaurant, a grand, open-air terrace overlooking the sea. The sunset painted the sky in streaks of gold and violet, and the faint sound of live jazz floated through the air. Eleanor had chosen this place years ago as the heart of Seabreeze, a space where families could share laughter and love under the stars. Now, as she sat across from her son and daughter-in-law, she felt like an outsider in her own creation. Nicole ordered the most expensive wine without glancing at the menu. "I hope this isn't one of those cheap resort brands," she said to the waiter, barely hiding her disdain. Adrian laughed and placed his hand over hers. "Relax, babe. It's supposed to be 5-star. Eleanor watched the exchange in silence, her heart aching. When the food arrived, plates of grilled lobster, roasted vegetables, and creamy risotto, she smiled politely and picked at her meal while Nicole talked endlessly about her upcoming social events, brand collaborations, and the new villa she wanted to buy in Italy. Not once did Adrian or Nicole ask her how she was or what she thought. Midway through dinner, a man approached their table, tall, distinguished, wearing a tailored suit. "Mrs. Carter," he said respectfully, inclining his head. It was Mr. Daniels, the resort's general manager, a man who had worked under her guidance for nearly 2 decades. "It's a pleasure to have you with us again." Eleanor froze, caught between pride and panic. Nicole looked up, brows furrowing. "I'm sorry, who are you?" she asked. Mr. Daniels smiled. "I was simply greeting Mrs. Carter." Eleanor cut him off gently. "Thank you, Mr. Daniels. It's wonderful to see you again. Please, continue with your evening." He seemed to understand instantly, nodding before walking away. But Nicole's suspicion lingered. "How does he know you?" she asked sharply. "You've never been here before, have you?" Eleanor took a sip of water, her voice steady. "I may have visited years ago." Nicole frowned, unconvinced, but dropped the subject when her dessert arrived. After dinner, Eleanor excused herself and wandered out toward the beach. The night air was cool and soft, carrying the distant laughter of guests. She walked barefoot along the sand, her footsteps sinking into the damp surface as waves lapped at her ankles. Above her, the stars shimmered, silent witnesses to everything she had built and everything she had lost. She thought of Adrian as a child, of the way he used to run along the shore with his kite, shouting her name as the wind filled its sails. Somewhere along the way, she had lost that version of him. Or perhaps, she thought bitterly, she had lost him the day she let Nicole into their lives without question. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She was not a woman who cried. She was a woman who rebuilt her world from ashes. When she finally returned to the suite, the lights were dim. Adrian and Nicole's laughter drifted faintly from the balcony, mingled with the sound of clinking glasses. She closed her door quietly behind her and sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the city lights beyond the window. Her mind was calm, but a quiet fire had started to burn in her chest. Maybe it was time to stop pretending. Maybe it was time for them to see who she really was, not the frail, polite woman they dismissed, but the architect of everything they now enjoyed. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, scrolling through her contacts until she found the number she wanted. It had been years since she called it. With a deep breath, she pressed dial. "Mr. Daniels," she said softly when he answered. I think it's time we had a little talk. The next morning dawned golden and clear, the kind of morning that made the sea shimmer like melted glass. Eleanor stood by her window, sipping tea as the sunlight danced across the waves. She had barely slept, her mind replaying the humiliation from the day before. The laughter, the whispers, the way Adrian had looked through her as if she were nothing. But now her expression was different. Calm. Determined. She had decided that she would not confront them in anger or pride. She would let the truth speak for itself. When she called Mr. Daniels the night before, she had given him simple instructions. Arrange a private family brunch in the Royal Hall at noon. Make it perfect, she had said quietly. And discreet. He had understood immediately. After all, this resort's success had been built on her intuition. She dressed carefully that morning in a soft cream dress, elegant yet simple, pairing it with a string of pearls her late husband had given her decades ago. As she pinned her silver hair back, she caught her reflection in the mirror and smiled faintly. The woman staring back at her was no longer invisible. At precisely 11:30, there was a knock on her door. "Mrs. Carter," came Mia's voice. "Everything's ready downstairs." Eleanor opened the door and smiled. "Thank you, dear." Mia's eyes sparkled with admiration. "It's about time," she whispered. Eleanor chuckled softly. "Yes, I think it is." She made her way toward the Royal Hall, her heels clicking steadily against the polished floors. As she walked, staff members glanced up from their duties, some recognizing her, others simply feeling the quiet authority she carried. The large double doors to the hall opened to reveal a breathtaking setup, white linens, crystal glasses, and a panoramic view of the ocean framed by gold drapes. Everything gleamed under the sunlight streaming through the tall windows. Adrian and Nicole were already there, seated at the center table, both looking mildly irritated. Finally, Nicole muttered as Eleanor entered, "We were starting to think you forgot." Eleanor smiled pleasantly and took her seat across from them. "I had a few things to attend to," she said. Adrian glanced around. "Why are we even having brunch in a ballroom? Couldn't we just eat at the restaurant?" "Because," Eleanor said softly, "sometimes privacy is necessary." Before they could ask what she meant, Mr. Daniels entered the room, accompanied by two assistants carrying folders. He greeted Eleanor with a polite bow. "Mrs. Carter, everything is in order." Adrian blinked. "Wait, Mrs. Carter," he asked, confused. "Why are they calling you that?" "That's our name." Eleanor folded her hands neatly on the table, her eyes steady and calm. "Because it's mine," she said. "This resort, this building, this company, it all bears my name. I built Seabreeze from the ground up. Every tile, every flower arrangement, every smile you see from the staff exists because I wanted to create a place where families could be together. It's mine." The room went still. Nicole's face drained of color, her mouth opening and closing in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" she stammered. You own this place." Eleanor nodded. "Yes, dear. I own this place, and 10 others like it." Adrian looked stunned, his glass of orange juice trembling slightly in his hand. "Mom, what?" Eleanor turned her gaze to him, her voice soft but firm. "I never told you because I wanted you to grow into your own man. I didn't want you to depend on my money or my name. I wanted you to know the value of hard work, of kindness. But somewhere along the way, I think you lost sight of both." Nicole forced a laugh, brittle and nervous. "You're joking. This is ridiculous. If you really owned this resort, we wouldn't have had to fight for our room yesterday." Eleanor's lips curved into a small smile. "Oh, you didn't have to fight for anything, Nicole. I simply let you show me who you really were." She turned to Mr. Daniels. "Please bring the file." Mr. Daniels opened the folder and placed it in front of Nicole. Inside were legal documents, ownership certificates, company records, photographs of Eleanor breaking ground at the resort's construction site decades ago. Nicole's fingers trembled as she flipped through the pages. "No," she whispered. "This isn't possible." Adrian leaned back in his chair, eyes wide with shock. You're the owner of Seabreeze?" "Founder and owner," Eleanor corrected gently. "For the past 40 years." She took a slow sip of her tea before continuing. "And now I think it's time for a few changes." Her voice, though calm, carried a quiet authority that made even Nicole fall silent. Mr. Daniels, I'd like you to remove the Carter reservation from the penthouse suite. Instead, please transfer it to the Ocean View Deluxe. The one they were offered yesterday will do just fine." Nicole's face turned red. "You can't do that," she snapped. "Adrian, say something." Adrian opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked at his mother, the mother he had mocked, dismissed, and ignored, and for the first time he seemed to truly see her. "Mom," he said slowly, "why didn't you ever tell me?" Eleanor's eyes softened. "Because, my dear, love should never depend on status. I wanted you to be proud of yourself, not what I could give you. But after yesterday," she exhaled, shaking her head slightly. "Yesterday showed me that silence can sometimes be mistaken for weakness." Nicole pushed back her chair, her voice trembling with fury. "This is insane. You think you can humiliate me like this?" Eleanor's tone stayed even. "No, Nicole. I think you've done that quite well on your own." For a long moment, no one spoke. The ocean shimmered behind them, endless and indifferent. Finally, Eleanor rose from her chair. "You may both stay for the rest of the week if you wish. The bill is already settled, as it always is for family. But after that, I think it's time we all took some space." She looked at Adrian, her gaze softening. "You're still my son. You always will be. But I hope one day you'll understand that respect isn't something that comes with money. It's something you give freely, or you lose everything that matters." Adrian's voice cracked. "Mom, I'm sorry." Eleanor smiled faintly. "I know, dear. But sorry needs time to mean something." She turned toward the door, the hem of her dress sweeping softly against the marble floor. Every step she took felt lighter, freer. The staff standing outside straightened immediately as she passed, their respect quiet but powerful. Mia met her near the exit, eyes shining with pride. "That was incredible," she whispered. Eleanor smiled, her voice gentle. "No, my dear. It was necessary." That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the sea shimmered with streaks of violet and gold. The resort lights began to glow one by one, and music drifted softly from the terrace bar. Eleanor stood on her balcony, feeling the warm coastal breeze brush against her skin. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about profit margins, business meetings, or even family politics. She was simply breathing, alive, calm, and free. Down below, guests strolled along the garden paths she had personally designed years ago. She remembered selecting the flowers herself, orchids and jasmine for their scent, hibiscus for color. They symbolized the balance she had always tried to maintain in her life: beauty, strength, and resilience. But somewhere along the way, she had allowed her heart to be trampled by the people she loved most. Tonight, however, she was done carrying that weight. A knock at the door broke her thoughts. It was Adrian. He looked different now, tired, ashamed, and certain. "Mom," he said quietly, "can I come in?" Eleanor nodded and stepped aside. He entered, closing the door behind him. For a long time, he said nothing. The silence stretched between them, heavy but necessary. Finally, he spoke. "I didn't know, Mom. I swear I didn't know. Nicole told me you didn't have much, that you didn't want people to know you were struggling. I thought I was helping." Eleanor regarded him steadily. "And did it never occur to you to ask me yourself?" He looked down, shame coloring his face. "I guess I didn't want to embarrass you." She shook her head slowly. "No, Adrian. You didn't want to question her." He swallowed hard, then whispered, "You're right." He sat down, burying his face in his hands. "I've been a fool." Eleanor crossed the room and sat across from him, her voice gentle. "No, my dear. You've been blind. But blindness can heal if you open your eyes." Adrian lifted his head, eyes glistening. "I don't know how to fix this." Eleanor sighed, her gaze turning to the horizon where the last light of the sun was fading. "Some things can't be fixed, only understood. You let someone convince you that love means control and that kindness means weakness. But real love isn't about how much you get, it's about how much you respect." He nodded slowly, her words cutting deeper than any scolding could. "Nicole's packing her things," he said after a pause. "She's angry. She says she won't stay where she's not wanted." Eleanor's tone remained even. "Then let her go. Sometimes losing someone who doesn't value you is the same as finding peace. For a while, they sat in silence. Then Adrian said softly, "The kids, Zoe and Daniel, they really like it here. I think they finally started to see you today." Eleanor smiled faintly. Children always see the truth before adults do. They just need someone to show them what kindness looks like. He looked at her, hesitant. Would you spend some time with them tomorrow? Without me or Nicole? Just you and them." Eleanor's eyes warmed. "I'd like that very much." He stood, rubbing the back of his neck, awkwardly. I'll let you rest. Thank you for not throwing me out too." She gave him a small, sad smile. "You're my son, Adrian. That means you always have a place in my heart, but not always in my home." He nodded, tears forming, and left quietly. The next morning, Eleanor woke early and met her grandchildren by the beach. Without screens or distractions, they looked unsure at first, as if meeting her for the first time. "Grandma," Zoe asked shyly, "do you really own this place?" Eleanor chuckled. "Yes, sweetheart. I built it a long time ago." Daniel's eyes widened. "You mean like the boss?" "Exactly," she said, smiling. "But being the boss doesn't mean being mean. It means making sure everyone here feels safe and cared for." They spent the morning walking along the shore, collecting seashells, and talking about dreams. She told them how she started her first in with only a few dollars and a bucket of paint, how she cleaned rooms, cooked meals, and welcomed guests with the same care she would give her family. "When you grow up," she said softly, "never forget that respect is the real luxury. Money fades, looks fade, but kindness stays." The children listened with wide eyes, and for the first time, she saw in them something she hadn't seen in years: connection. By noon, Nicole had left the resort without saying goodbye. Her designer luggage had been wheeled out silently by staff, and her taxi disappeared down the sunlit road. Adrian stayed behind, helping his children pack their beach toys, his expression heavy but peaceful. As Eleanor watched them from her balcony, she felt no bitterness, only relief. She had finally spoken the truth, and the world had not ended. It had simply shifted, like the tide returning to balance. Later that evening, when the resort hosted its weekly gala for guests, Mr. Daniels approached her. "Ma'am," he said with quiet respect, "the staff asked me to tell you something." "Yes," she asked. "They said thank you for reminding everyone who you are and what this place truly stands for." Eleanor smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion. "Tell them I'm the one who's grateful," she whispered. "They're the real heart of this place." When the music began, she stood on the terrace, watching couples dance under the starlit sky. The air was warm, scented with jasmine and sea salt. For the first time in a long while, she felt whole. Her son's laughter echoed softly from the garden where he played with the children, and though they still had a long road ahead, it was a beginning, a chance to rebuild on honesty, not illusion. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "Sometimes, losing everything you thought you needed is how you finally find yourself." The wind carried her words out over the ocean, a quiet prayer, a promise of peace. In the days that followed, Eleanor extended her stay at the resort, not as its owner overseeing business, but as a guest rediscovering joy. She spent her mornings reading on the balcony, her afternoons teaching Zoe and Daniel how to swim, and her evenings walking through the gardens she had planted with her own hands. The staff no longer hid their affection when they greeted her. They smiled openly, proud to serve the woman who had built their home away from home. She had once feared growing old alone, but now she realized solitude could be its own kind of freedom, a space where dignity lived, where self-worth could breathe again. As she stood by the water on her final night, the moon rising silver above the sea, she thought of all she had endured, the betrayal, the shame, the anger, and felt only gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered to the waves, "for reminding me who I am." Behind her, Adrian called out, "Mom, the kids want to show you the sandcastle they built." She turned, smiling, her heart full. She walked toward them, her steps light, her spirit steady. And for the first time in a very long time, Eleanor Carter, the woman once dismissed as just the help, felt exactly what she had always been. Whole, powerful, enough.